Well, good morning, Honors Algebra 1. Today is Monday, April 6th, and we are starting Chapter 11 today. We're starting Chapter 11 today, and we will have a test on Chapter 10 on Wednesday. And I'll go over your homework for tonight in just a little bit. So we're talking in this chapter, and the name of this chapter, let me go ahead, I should have written that up there for you, is Rational and Irrational Numbers. So we're going to talk today about the properties of rational numbers. Rational number is defined to be a real number, exists on the number line, expressed as a quotient of two integers, and we know quotient means divide. So let's look at this first example. 3 is rational because it can be written as 3 over 1, 6 over 2, and so forth and so on. I have an infinite number of values for 3 written as a ratio or a fraction with two integers. How about -1 and 4/5? Well, the easiest way to write that as a quotient of two integers is -9 over 5 or 9 over -5. Also, I could write it as -18 over, whoops, that's not, should be 100, that should be 10. Mistake. Okay, let's keep going. 48%. Okay, an easy way to write that as a fraction of two integers would be 48 over 100. You could reduce it to 24 over 30, go on and on and on. And the decimal number 0.6 is obviously written as 6/10. Reduce it to 3/5, expand it to 60/100. The number of fractions is infinite. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is which is greater of these two fractions, 8/3 or 17/7. Now let's find a least common denominator. We're going back to 7th grade math here. The least common denominator of 3 and 7 is 21. And so I have 56 over 21 compared to 51 over 21 when I expand both of these fractions. 3 times 7 is 21, 8 times 7 is 56. 7 times 3 is 21, 17 times 3 is 51. So we're just going back to 7th grade expanding of fractions. Now, when we have a common denominator, we can compare the numerators now. And 56/21 is definitely greater than 51/21. And so when you write your answer for homework, you'll go back and use the original fractions and say that 8/3 is greater than 17/7. Let's move on over here. This is something you haven't had before. Another way to compare two fractions is using cross multiplication. This is pretty cool. If I have A over C is greater than B over D, so this fraction is greater than this fraction, I can prove that by taking the cross product. A times D will be greater than the cross product B times C. But you've got to always start with the numerator of the first fraction and multiply by the denominator of the second fraction. So be careful with that. Your pattern has to be AD and then BC. Now, how about if this fraction AC is less than BD? Well, if that's the case, then another mistake. Oh boy. A times D is going to be less than the cross product BC. All right, now let's see how that works with a couple of examples here. Now, the first one is I want to compare -5/8 to -7/13. Okay, now you're saying, what do I do with this negative sign? Well, you can assign it to either the 5 or the 8. I'm going to go ahead and move it up and assign it to the numerator and leave the denominator positive. And I'm going to assign the negative sign here to the 7, to the numerator. So now let's see what the relationship is between these two fractions. So -5 times 13. That product, we're going to compare that product to -7 times 8. Well, -5 times 13 is -65. -7 times 8 is -56. Which one is a smaller number? Well, if you think about your number line, when we go into the negatives, -65 is to the left of -56 on the number line, and therefore its value is less. And so for my answer, I would say -5/8 is less than -7/13. Let's try one more over here with a mixed number. I've got 6 and 4/7. I want to compare it to 53/9. So I'm just going to change this mixed number to an improper fraction, and then I'm going to do my cross products. is 46 times 9. What is its relationship to 53 times 7? Well, if I multiply here, I get 414 for the first product, 371 for the second product, and therefore, this product is greater, and therefore 6 4/7 is greater than 53/9. Okay, so that's using cross products to compare fractions. So now let's go ahead to this side and let's look at another new concept. What if I want to find the number halfway between 3/4 and 5/6? Well, that seems a little bit tough. So what I want to do first is talk about something simple. What is halfway between 6 and 8? Well, halfway between 6 and 8 would be this. You would take the number 6, the first number here, and you would add to it half of the difference between 6 and 8. So 8 minus 6 is 2. Half of 2 is 1. So 6 plus 1 is 7. To do this, you always want to have the smaller number listed first. Okay, now let's go ahead. What is halfway between 3/4 and 5/6? Well, I start with 3/4, and then I'm going to add half of the difference. Okay, half of the difference, well, I'm going to find the common denominator here is 10/12 minus 9/12 for these two fractions rewritten. And so that gives you 1/2. So I'm going to go back and start with 3/4 and add half of the difference. So I'm adding 3/4 to 1/24, excuse me, I get 19/24. Now, can you just find the average of those two? Absolutely. You can add those two together and then take half of the sum. That is fine too, but on the homework, it's going to ask you some things that are a little bit trickier. Find the number 1/3 of the way from two fractions. Find the number 1/4 of the way from two fractions. So instead of putting 1/2 here to find something 1/4, you're going to replace this fraction with 1/4. Or if you're asked to find something 1/3 of the way between two fractions or two numbers, you will start with the original number and add 1/3 of the difference. So you need to know how this pattern works. Now, let's do something a little bit more challenging. What if I have negative numbers and I want to find halfway between these two? Well, I'm going to start with the first number, negative 5/39, and I'm going to add half of the difference. And so I take the larger number, negative 6/117, and subtract this negative number. Well, what happens when I am subtracting a negative? I'm really adding a positive, okay? And so the difference here becomes 5/39 minus 6/117 reduces to 1/13. Now I'm going to show you in your calculator how to add fractions like this together. We're going to do that in just a second. But then, now that I've got half of the difference, I'm going to add that half a difference to the original smaller value, and I get negative 7/78. Now, let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and let's share that. So let me get rid of this, and I'm going to expand this. So we have a big old calculator. Now, the very last step I had was, I'm looking behind me to see what it is. It was negative 5/39. So I would enter in negative 5 divided by 39, and I'm going to add to that 1/26. I'm going to add 1 divided by 26. I'm going to add those two fractions together. Now I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to get this negative decimal number. But we go to the math key, and then it says, do I want to go make this number into a fraction? And I hit yes, and then I have to hit enter, and then I want to hit enter one more time, and it tells me my final answer is negative 7/78. So that's how you can add fractions using your calculator. Now, let's go ahead and talk about our homework. Now, this is lesson 11.1. We want to complete it and upload it, the assignment to LMS. Y'all have been doing really well with that. Now, also, I'm going to give you a short quiz today on the last two sections of the last chapter, okay, 10.7 and 10.8, because we want to go ahead and have our test on Wednesday. So I'll get these graded and back to you on Tuesday. Now, these questions are all asking you to draw graphs. So the best thing you could do would be print off the quiz itself, open it up and print it off if you can. If you can't, that's okay. But you're going to have to use some graph paper in order to do your answers for this. So I have put graph paper on the class resources section, but if you can print that off, you might as well print the quiz off itself. So some of you have been printing off the quiz. That's okay. I kind of have requested that we just do it on plain paper, but anyway, print off this quiz, the actual quiz, and take a picture of it and send it back. Or if you've already got graph paper, then go ahead and you can graph it yourself. Okay, and then send me a picture. Either way, it'll be fine. So that's it. Tomorrow, we will continue on in our new chapter 11, and we will, I'll get your quizzes back to you, and then Wednesday, you will have an open textbook test on chapter 10, and I'll tell you how all that's going to work with a little test tutorial coming up. All right, well, I hope y'all have a blessed day, and I miss you, and I really hope we'll get to see you again before school is out, so we'll be praying for that. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.